Kia ora, I'm Erin J. Doyle. Welcome to my channel and welcome to those of you that are new. General apologies for this, all of this, just ignore it, it's not going to get better anytime soon. I have managed to clear off 3 shelves. There are many more left to go in this direction. But anyway, whilst I am sorting through my stuff and putting it in boxes and shipping it down south for storage and then filling in an unending sea of paperwork to allow me to go to the UK for 4 years, I'm also thinking about what book I write next. I have, as I've mentioned previously, finished my Camino story. I've sent it off to a publisher. We are waiting very patiently but very not holding our breath to hear back from them. And now I have to write something else. So the publisher that I've sent it to is not interested in sci-fi fantasy. They're very much interested in like historical, contemporary, a few other things, but that kind of territory. The wildly unreal? No, not for them. And that's kind of my dilemma, right? If they pick up my Camino story and then if they ask me what else I have, they're going to be happiest if I can go, here is another contemporary fiction. They're probably not going to be interested, and by probably I mean certainly, they're not going to be interested in bizarre anything. So this presents a dilemma because not a lot of my ideas are contemporary fiction at all. So I need to decide what I'm going to work on, and to that end I made a list of some of the projects I have on my big giant list of ideas which I think have potential. Some of the things on that list, yeah, they're like probably never going to be even a short story. They're very weird or super underdeveloped, kind of like barely a concept, but like maybe one day I'll get to them. So I've made a list of the ones which I think are more than just a concept and could be added to if I put some energy into it. So the first 2 on the list are things which I've drafted over the last couple of years, like during NaNoWriMo events. And they are rough drafts, but they are 50,000+ words. One is a non-fiction, which this publisher could potentially be interested in. I think of these 2 things that I have drafted, it is the closest to complete. What is on the page I think is good. Obviously it needs an edit, it is still a rough draft, but like it's more than just bones and what's there is good. It just needs like a little extra here and there and a thorough edit and maybe a rearranging of the chapters, because the chapters are kind of standalone, like the order of them doesn't matter, but they might flow better if I rearrange them and maybe make like subcategories and stuff, because it's non-fiction. Sorry about why my voice is dying on me all of a sudden. The issue I have with that story, or that book I should say, the working title for this book is Lessons from the First Half of My Life. And at least based on family pedigree, I expect to live to 90, give or take. But pretty common for people, particularly women in my family, to make it into their 90s and still be living independently. So to say that I'm only just hitting the halfway point at 40, I don't think is too much of a stretch. And I've been thinking that I wanted this book released when I was in my early to mid 40s. So the timing would work if I worked on this and got it all finished. This is the time to get that done, but I'm about to spend the next 4 years doing a PhD. This is a time in my life that's still probably in the first half. I mean barely, but probably still in the first half. where I'll be having a whole bunch of experiences I haven't had before and which could provide really interesting content for this very specific project. Like, not just the doing a PhD, but the packing up my life and going overseas for a prolonged period. Like, these are things which could provide a lot of lessons to put into this book, and it seems maybe a bit premature to try and complete that book now and have nowhere to put those potential content. So yeah, that one gives me a little bit of hesitation, and then I'm kind of going back and forth a bit because I'm like, well, maybe I could make what I've got good and then add any additional ideas later, and I'm like, that's definitely what I should do. But that doesn't feel like happy fun times to me, and I feel like at the moment I need some like happy fun times for the writing, because things have been quite stressful lately, i.e. like the last 2 years of my life. So that makes me go, I don't want to do it. Or maybe this is a thing that I never fully dedicate to, and it's a thing that I just keep as a constant active project that's never the top priority, but it's always just kind of casually there. And maybe this is turning into a long video if I put this much explanation into it. Maybe this is a thing that I'm never like high priority working on, but I just have always active, and I just occasionally add to here and there. And maybe I could schedule that, like, you know, one evening a month or something, just to kind of do a little bit here and there, so that in 5 years it is finished instead of still a draft. But I don't know about that. Moving on. The other story which I've rough drafted in the last few years is a sci-fi reimagining of The Little Mermaid. And this was the first thing I ever wrote where I went into it with an actual plot, like actual plan. Everything else I'd ever written was just like, here is a blank page and no words! This thing, I knew what I wanted it to be. I was really confident. I wrote 50,000 words in 7 days. Like, I went hard writing that draft, and it's not good. Like, it needs to be not just like edited and played around with, it needs to be completely replotted and rewritten from scratch. That's not to suggest that what I've done on it is bad. I think it was more what I've done on it gave me a learning experience to get me further down the path from pants to plotting. I hate pantsing as a word, but anyway. So it's not like a wasted experience or anything, but I really don't think that book's anywhere near ready. And so that makes me think I need to, instead of just trying to make it tidy, I do need to go right back to the ground roots of it, and grassroots, I think is what I meant to say there, and start replotting it, because it's really unclear, I think, when you read it, what the motivations of the antagonists really is. Like, there are two antagonists who are set up. One of them turns out to be a good guy, not because that was intended, but because as I was writing it, I was like, this is really inconvenient for this person to be an antagonist. I'm just going to make them, like, secretly they turned out to be good in the end. And so that's really, like, rough and weird. And then there's another antagonist who I'm just like, I really don't know why this person's being a dick. So, like, that level of it needs to be rethought out. The other issue that I have, particularly with this story, and the reason why I think it's probably not the thing to go with right now, is the fact that originally I intended to have two perspective characters, and as I was writing it, I discovered that one of those perspective characters I hate. Like, as a person, I hate him. He's not meant to be an antagonist, but I just don't like him. And I realized it's because he's a nice guy, and I hate him. And I don't know that I can fix that and have it be from his perspective. Like, I can have the character and I can have him do all the same things, but I think if I'm telling it from his perspective, the fact that I'm aware that he sucks is gonna be an issue. So Again, this is something I became aware of as I was drafting it, and I tried to fix it by bringing in other prospective characters, but because they weren't meant to be prospective characters originally, they felt underdeveloped, and so I really feel like I need to, yeah, really strip that one back. And that doesn't sound like happy fun times either. And then we get on to the things that I've done nothing on and I'm very excited about, and maybe I'm just going to end up drafting 1,000 books and never finishing any, but anyway, here I am. So I have an idea for a story that's magical realism, and I think it's still really underdeveloped and I could work on it. I could take it from where it's at and just build on it. Like, it's not like weird, like the fact that it's underdeveloped isn't because there's something I can't figure out, it's just that I haven't put the work in. Next I have a superhero story which I'm more confident about, like in terms of the world building. I know the main character's motivations, like you know, what events have to happen in what order to get the character from A to B, and I have an idea of the world building and the characters. Like, there's a whole bunch of stuff with the superhero's family. I just have to actually write it down and plot it all out and make sure that it actually works on paper, because I find that on paper, where you can actually see how much is there instead of just kind of have it abstract in your head, it's easier to see how much content is actually thought about, as opposed to kind of, yeah, like abstract fluff in your head that feels like it takes up a lot of room and therefore should be a lot of words but isn't. But yeah, I feel like that one, it has potential, definitely. I think it's a good story, and I don't have to do a lot of like major decision making, like that's been done. I just need to actually write down all the points. I think there might be a couple of fuzzy places where I know there has to be some stuff in between two events, but I'm not quite sure the extent of what is missing, and that's why I think I need to actually write it all down. I just haven't started that process yet. My next idea is one that is contemporary fiction. It might be a sensible one to work on, seeing the book that I currently have sent off into the world, well, not into the world, towards a publisher in the hopes that it gets to the world. Because that's contemporary fiction, maybe I should work on this contemporary fiction, which is going to require some research because it's set in the real world. I don't know if I can really do a whole bunch of research on a very real thing whilst I'm doing research for like my day job, which I guess is already true, but like PhD feels bigger. I don't know if that made any sense. What am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that PhD plus researching for a book might be a little exhausting, rather than the happy fun times, which is what I really want for this project. Like, I want something that's going to be fun and easy to work on whilst doing a PhD. The other thing with the story is that it's begging to be cliched. Like, the main character is, you know, a successful career woman in the big city, and every summer she goes back to the town where she grew up and like helps out in the mum's garden and stuff. And I feel like the moment I say that, it's like, ah yes, and then she meets a rugged like neighbour boy and realises that she didn't need that career that she's worked so hard for. She just needs the guy who, you know, hasn't shaved. That's all she really needs, not a career. And I just so I could either, like, actually there's nothing wrong with that, it's just not something that I want, and that message of the career was a bad idea isn't something that I as a career person am going to be happy with. So yeah, I need to either, I reckon, go hard and embrace that option, but maybe put like, maybe I just put like a queer spin on it, just so I'm like slightly less annoyed at the cliche, or The other alternative, which I've recently thought of, is I throw in a sinister surprise, which I'm more inclined to think I would enjoy writing. However, like I said, yeah, a lot of research is going to be needed for this book. Research. So, the next idea I have, I like the idea. As I originally had the idea, I think it would be distasteful at this time because the inspiration for the idea is rooted in current events, specifically the war in Ukraine. And I don't think it's nice. I think it's icky for someone who is in no way affected. Like, I am not in Europe. I've never been a refugee. My country's never been invaded. Well, you know, in the last 100 years. It feels like I'm not a person who should be writing a story in that setting at this time. So, to avoid the obvious about that, I thought what I could do is take this exact story, which is about a person in a country that gets invaded by its neighbour, and that person has to run for their life. I could take that exact same scenario and make it fantasy. And that would kind of fix it, right? Like, if it's not a real country, it's not a real war, if I throw in like dragons and orcs or magic or whatever and really embrace that fantasy world building, then I can still tell the story of someone fleeing a war without it being a story that's taking advantage of a real situation or taking the place of a story which could be written by someone who's actually there, which is obviously the voice that we should be listening to, not my like, oh yeah, that's an interesting situation, because it's not an interesting situation, it's a tragic and horrific situation, and hence the ick. So anyway, the point is, I think the story itself isn't reliant on the real world setting, so I could make it a magical setting and that would fix that ickiness. But I know nothing about the fantasy world that I would set it in. Like, the original concept or inspiration is a real world, so there's no magical hoo-ha sort of around the idea, so I'd have to create all of that. So that would be fun, but a lot of work, because I'd have to like create a world from scratch just for a refugee to exist in some way. Could be a lot of fun, but again, oh, it feels icky. Like, and does anyone really want to read about a fantasy refugee from a fantasy war at the moment? Like, does it feel like maybe something that we don't want to read about right now? And that brings me to the last of my ideas that I could work on, and it is another fantasy. This fantasy is an isekai, and I'm very, very confident in the world build and the magic system, which suggests that it's the one to go with, right? Like, all the big stuff that you kind of have to just make up is made up, and I'm really happy with how it all works. So that one, I have actually started writing it down to see how much I've got, and there are some things that need to be fixed. Like, the beginning of the story is really good in terms of, I should rephrase, I'm really confident with the beginning of the story, and then I get less confident as we go. But I'm kind of tempted to just start writing anyway, because I'm so confident about the beginning, and I have this like, well, maybe I will find my way to the end, seeing I'm so confident about the start. But am I gonna just end up with like 3/4 of a novel and then nothing? So this is why I have yet to make a decision, because everything has a challenge attached to it. So at the moment, of the ideas, I feel like the isekai one has the strongest world build, it has the strongest characters. It's also one of the most unique because even though it's relying quite a lot on kind of existing tropes within isekai, it's also using a magic system that I've never encountered anywhere else. Like, I don't think I've ever read anything like it, and I'm quite proud of it. So I think that gives it potential, but it also means that I've got to do it right, because if I write more books within the same universe, then that magic system is retained, and I have to make sure I describe it correctly in the first book in which it's brought up. But that is quite exciting. So I think I'm probably going to move forward with the isekai. The fact that it doesn't require research is quite helpful in that. And if I write the isekai, then I've created a universe in which this magic system, which I feel is pretty unique, exists. Then potentially I could use that same world with that magic system for the other one that needs to be in a fantasy world, but I don't know anything about the fantasy world yet because I haven't thought about it. But if I create a fantasy world for book 1, then I can be like, aha, and now there's a war and a refugee, and this is book 2. And actually, so the isekai, there's meant to be a war. Oh my god, that fixes everything! Because then the refugee character can just be fleeing that war in that world. Oh my god, okay. Brilliant! So yeah, I think that's what I'm gonna do. Because I feel like the others still need a lot of either research or figuring out, and yes, I know that isekai does as well, but yeah, I feel like either that or the superhero one has the best kind of world building and blah blah blah. But I feel like I have a stronger sense of the isekai story than I do the superhero one. Like it feels more solid in my mind. So, and now potentially it has a sequel. So that's exciting. I guess I'm gonna do that. Oh, this turned out to be a very productive video, didn't it? And then I'll never ever do any of it. No, we will proceed. Anyway, so I guess I've just made a decision. I'm gonna go quickly write down some stuff now. Thanks for sitting through while I figured that out. And I hope you enjoyed. If so, you know, click the buttons and stuff down below. I was about to say downstairs, oh my god. Let me know what stories you think sound interesting maybe in the comments down below. Like, confuse my decision making process at your will. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!